Good day, everyone. Welcome to WCEE's virtual executive exchange event. I am Barbara Tyran, past president of the Women's Council on Energy and the Environment, WCEE, and we're delighted to have you all with us today. We are featuring two leaders in the NARUC community, Danielle Sass Byrnett, Director of the Center for Partnerships and Innovation, and Lynn Costantini, Deputy Director. Together, we will explore the issues facing state regulators and how their organization helps them meet these challenges. As always, please feel free to place any questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We welcome all questions. And while you are collecting your thoughts and formulating your questions, I will start us off with a few of my own. So welcome, Lynn, Danielle, so good to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit, please, about the origins of the Center for Partnerships and Innovation?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Barbara, for the invitation to join you and the WCEE members. It's a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed attending previous WCEE events. The Center for Partnerships and Innovation is NARUC's technical assistance team. We are essentially the staff at NARUC based in Washington, D.C., who provides additional support to all of the public utility commissioners and commission staff across the country. We are a grant-funded team with a wide-ranging portfolio, and I'm going to just throw up a slide here to show you, without just talking to all of these bullets, what the many different categories and areas of work are that we are engaged in. We really focus on building relationships with commissions and experts, subject matter experts across the country, across our fields, within the federal government and elsewhere. We develop a lot of resources, and we also produce trainings for our members. And we're doing this by trying to anticipate what are the questions that they're going to need to answer, what are the decisions they're going to be making now and in the future, and providing them with a solid foundation for being really well-informed decision makers. As you can see, we cover as I said, a wide range of topical areas. It covers technology modernization and how technology relates to the public utility regulatory space, from carbon capture and natural gas and nuclear down to smart grid and EVs and changing efficiency in buildings. We also do a lot of work in the electricity system transition and planning space, around distribution planning, bulk power system planning, comprehensive planning, performance-based regulation, and other activities. And we make sure that we're leaving room for emerging issues as well. We host a monthly webinar series that is publicly accessible, and we hope WCEE members will join. And we do quite a bit around critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, and resilience, which Lynn Costantini leads, and I'll hand it over to her to say a few words about that.
Sure, thanks. And I also want to express my appreciation, Barbara, for allowing us to be here today to talk about the work that we do in CPI. As Danielle mentioned, my portfolio of projects really is focused on the bottom left quadrant of the slide that Danielle has available: critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, and resilience work. When I joined NARUC in 2018, we had already done a lot of work in this space. We had put together some risk management primers. We had put together some cybersecurity primers. We had also done some work with microgrids and resilience, valuing resilience in terms of grid reliability, for example. Our job today is to build on that really great work that had already been in process. And I view my job as really growing the expertise within public utility commissions and putting some resources into their hands where they can really put that expertise to work for the ultimate benefit of state ratepayers.
And speaking of that growth, the team since early 2018 has grown from 3 people to 8. And the portfolio and the breadth of issues that we cover reflects that growth, and we anticipate more growth as well. So hopefully we'll inspire some people to reach out to us about potentially joining our team through the course of today.
Sounds like it's just thriving there. That's in considerable growth, and especially with more to come. So thank you. That's an excellent overview. I'm going to switch topics, and Danielle, this question's for you. You recently completed a major study on comprehensive electricity planning. Would you be willing to summarize those findings for us?
Thanks for asking. Yes, that was a really exciting project and something I was very grateful to be able to do through NARUC. It was called the NARUC NESIO Task Force on Comprehensive Electricity Planning. It was a 2.5-year effort with 15 states, and we had both public utility commissioners and state energy office directors from those 15 states in pairs, which was a newer approach to working together and collaboratively, which is something that we really focus on in the Center for Partnerships part. We worked over those couple of years to provide a strategic planning style forum for these commissioners and these energy office directors to really reimagine what an ideal version of electricity system planning would look like, and specifically how they could be bringing together the changing distribution system and distributed energy resources and planning that distribution system more proactively with traditional approaches to integrated resource planning and even, in some cases, transmission planning. And so we led these 15 state participants through a multi-stage process. We met in 4 workshops over 2 years. Of course, 2 of those ended up being virtual, but we expanded our capabilities, like everyone, and created a really engaged environment with some new online tools for collaborative work and decision-making that were a lot of fun. But the foundation was quite substantive, and we started by building this vision of standard building blocks of electricity system planning processes. And so we broke down, whether it's distribution planning or resource planning, what are the fundamental steps that are going to need to be taken. They might not always happen in the same order, but ultimately, you need to have a set of assumptions. You need to have some forecasts. You need to understand what you're trying to accomplish. You need to identify what are the system needs and what are the solution sets that you're going to use and consider for meeting those system needs. And ultimately, a plan comes out of all of this work, which the utilities, always lead and run with some oversight, varying natures from the Utility Commission, maybe some input from the State Energy Office. So we took that set of building blocks and we gave those to 5 different teams. As I said, there were 15 states. We grouped them in teams of 3 based on their market and regulatory structure. We wanted to ensure that the states that were working together were able to really envision a future state, not just what they do right now, but if they were advising the state of amber, the state of silver, the state of jade, with the expertise that they have, obviously from their current role, what would they advise them to do were they to start from scratch? And so we gave them that vision, that mindset, and grouped them with a facilitator and made sure that we were bringing states together who had a similar context in which they operated. And that's what resulted in this diagram that you see, whether they were within organized markets or outside, whether they are overseeing vertically integrated utilities or restructured utilities, essentially. And then those teams or cohorts decided which types of planning processes they really wanted to reimagine. Some, as you can see, went all in distribution, resource, and transmission planning. The JADE cohort, which is in restructured states, only has any purview over distribution planning. And so they were talking about aligning or comprehensive planning in the context of just the distribution system and efficiency programs and EV programs and things of that nature. And the result was a set of visions and roadmaps for better aligned planning. Of course, you're not going to read all of this right now, but you might recognize that Roy G. Biv style of building blocks. We kept that fundamental building block structure, and each of these cohorts or groups designed the future planning vision that they would want to see, that they think would work best in the context of their environment. And we represented it through these circular diagrams where the middle are distribution plans and the outer ring are transmission plans if they were doing all 3 or all of those types of planning approaches. And there are arrows between to show where there's alignment and integration steps that currently don't exist in the planning that has been happening to date. There are also places where you can see there's a large wedge instead of stripes. That's where there would be a more holistic approach to a specific step, like combined set of solution options, really considering DERs on an equivalent playing field with building new central station generation, for example. So we've produced all of these materials. This is just a little snapshot. There's actually a whole suite of resources that the task force members and staff from both organizations and subject matter experts contributed to, starting with a 4-page fact sheet, going up through this blueprint for state action, which is really a toolkit that anyone from a state could use at a commission or an energy office, and offer some step-by-step suggestions for how they could create their own version of that kind of vision and roadmap. And then other resources that can support decision makers and stakeholders as they are considering how planning could be improved, including a comprehensive library that I frequently get notes about people using that as a frequent resource as they're considering participating in different planning processes. So I hope that wasn't too much. It was a very exciting project, and I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about not just the results, but even how we did it, because I think it's highly applicable for other types of really challenging problems where you need lots of brains working together to figure out not how to replicate something, but how to create something that has not existed previously. And it was a very fun process to be part of guiding a group through that effort.
Thank you, Danielle. That was extraordinarily helpful, and congratulations on all the work products that you delivered out of this task force. It's really a remarkable series of achievements. And I'm sure, as you said, it has application to all sorts of other projects and consideration that are underway as the electricity sector evolves. So that's very helpful. The analytical tools are awesome. So with that, I do note that we've had several new participants arrive since the beginning. So I want to welcome them and remind everyone that this is your session. So please don't hesitate to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to pose any questions for Danielle and Lynn. They're happy to answer them, and we'd be delighted to hear from you. So again, all questions welcome. We'll continue on until some of those begin to arrive. I'll go next to Lynn, please. Lynn, cybersecurity is an ongoing challenge and likely to remain with us, wouldn't you agree, probably till the end of this century. How does CPI help state regulators understand this issue, which, as you know, is so complex?
Yeah, Barbara, that is a really good question. And you are absolutely right. Cybersecurity is a significant challenge that will be with us for a very long time. You know, first of all, the threats against our critical utility infrastructure are growing, and just in sheer numbers of threats and attacks on our critical infrastructure. They're also increasing in the sophistication of the attack and the attackers as well. And as we know, the consequences of a successful attack on our critical infrastructure really could be devastating. I think the Colonial Pipeline attack, that ransomware attack that happened back in February, gave us just a hint of what we might expect from a really successful cyber attack against one of our critical infrastructures. You know, another challenge that we're facing is that cybersecurity can get very technical very fast, especially in the utility space. This makes the conversations between cybersecurity decision makers and business decision makers a real challenge. Translating that cybersecurity risk into business risk is almost an art form, but it absolutely must happen. And it has to happen not just between utility CISOs and their boards of directors, but between utilities and their regulators. And one other challenge I want to bring forward is that there are way too few cybersecurity professionals, particularly in the utility space. And that just compounds the challenges that we've just been talking about. You know, studies suggest that we have far more cybersecurity positions available than we have people to fill. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. And the competition for talent is absolutely fierce. And those with the deepest pockets traditionally win. That's a real challenge for the public utility sector, including state public utility commissions. So it's not surprising that in NARUC, we really are concentrating our cybersecurity activities to address some of the challenges in those areas. And we typically follow a three-step process to do that. We raise awareness of the challenges, we train, and we provide actionable resources. We actually put those resources in the hands of the PUC decision makers. So, by example, to raise awareness, we regularly hold unclassified cybersecurity threat briefings from organizations like the MS ISAC and the Electricity ISAC. We've also organized special one-day classified read-ins for some of our PUC members that are provided by the FBI, the Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security, and the Director of National Intelligence. Now, all of this information is imperative to help state regulators understand the depth and breadth of what utilities are facing in terms of cybersecurity threats. Then we do cybersecurity training. As I said, access to cybersecurity expertise is really a challenge. So to combat that, we do training. We're training up the resources that are already resident within a PUC, helping them to understand what cybersecurity is all about. Give them the vocabulary to use when they're talking to their utilities about cybersecurity. For example, we had a training event in February. We had 350 participants register for that event. We just announced our next cybersecurity training event that will take place in September. We had more than 50 people register on the first day. That suggests to me that there continues to be a thirst for cybersecurity knowledge development within public utility commissions. So we'll keep doing it. And what I'm really particularly proud of is the actionable resources that we provide to our members. And that's what I wanted to show on the slide here. We have developed a suite of resources that we call our cybersecurity manual. They can be used individually or they can be used together in this process orientation that we show on this chart to really help PUCs organize themselves to engage utilities with cybersecurity. Then we give them tools to help them ask the right questions of their utilities about the utility's cybersecurity risk management practices. We also give them a tool then that they being the public utility commissions, can filter the answers that they get to those questions and get a sense of the effectiveness and the maturity of the utilities programs and processes. And lastly, we really want to engage the PUCs with exercises, really helping to demonstrate the engagement process and make sure that they are working collaboratively with their utilities to address cybersecurity. We also produce some topic-specific resources over and above our cybersecurity manual. For example, we just published a resource for cybersecurity talent recruitment and retention for public utility commissions. And we are currently working on an issue brief for cybersecurity insurance, trying to help debunk some of those myths around insurance. So again, public utility commissioners can have a meaningful discussion about cybersecurity insurance with their utilities. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but so much of our work really does focus in the cybersecurity area, because as you pointed out, that is one of our biggest challenges, and that will be with us for a long time.
Very helpful, Lynn. Thank you. That was an excellent, excellent overview of a very dynamic and evolving issue. The next question will actually be directed towards you again, Lynn, if I may, which is the topic of resilience, which is huge right now and dovetails very nicely with what you were just talking about. So my question is, how does CPI work with state commissions to identify ways to approach this issue? Because as you know, it has so many variations and facets to it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you could talk to 5 different people and ask them for their definition of resilience, you get 5 different answers, that's for sure. But that is really another very good question, and another question that I could spend hours answering, but I'll really try to keep it brief this time. I've already mentioned the microgrid work that we've done. That certainly relates to resilience. We've done some work attempting to value resilience and its contribution to grid reliability, for example. But really last year, I think, is when we took a major step to look at very specific issues around resilience. And that's when we formed the Emergency Response, Reliability, and Resilience Task Force. I think that's the right acronym. We call it the EPR Task Force, EPRR. And that task force was seated specifically to look at lessons learned from COVID, so we can apply those lessons when the next future catastrophe like this happens. We also sat a working group under the EPR task force to look at federal funding opportunities that are available to utilities as well as others to help them with their disaster planning and post-disaster response and recovery. That working group is also looking into the role of construction standards and how they can be leveraged to build back better. And that is one of the definitions of resilience. Let's make sure that we cannot just ride out the event, but that when the event actually does happen, that we can build it back better, not just build it back the same and suffer the same vulnerabilities. And then lastly, another working group is digging really deeply into black sky disaster planning. Now, we do a lot of disaster planning across the utility space, but black sky disasters are unique. It's not a hurricane, it's not an earthquake, it's not a forest fire, it's all of them together. And it's all of them together that catastrophically affect multiple industry sectors across multiple regions. That's our definition of a black sky, really catastrophic. And this working group is developing a technical playbook for state energy officials. So that's public utility commissions, that's state energy officials, the fuel people, if you will, as well as governor's advisors that they can employ before, during, and after a black sky event. So it's really a collaborative effort to put together tools to put into the hands of people that are going to need them for when the worst day happens. The COVID Lessons Learned report and the federal funding and construction standards deliverables, we should see them by the end of this year, September, this year being fiscal year. And then the work of the Black Sky Subcommittee will continue through next year. As you can imagine, it's very intense, and we really want to make sure that we get that right. So we should probably be looking for that sometime in the June-July timeframe for next year. But I encourage you to go out to the NARUC website and look at the EPR Task Force page. It's all laid out there, and interim deliverables are also out there.
Good, thank you very much. That's a great resource that you've identified, and I'm glad that you're working on this area. It sounds like you're thinking through all these many issues, and including the definition of resilience.
There will be more work on that specific topic. Look for that next year as well.
Good, thank you. So Danielle, FERC and NARUC recently launched a joint task force on electricity transmission. Can you tell us how you see the next 12 to 18 months unfolding for the task force?
I will do my best. I did just want to say that the work that Lynn leads for us is so important and so valuable and valued, fortunately, by our members. And I put the EPR Task Force URL into the chat for the folks who are joining us today. Of course. So yes, yet another task force. This one is the FERC NARUC Task Force. I think it's called formally the Joint Task Force on Electricity Transmission. It was just announced this summer, and NARUC just provided a set of nominees to FERC to be its participants and representatives. Those are 2 NARUC members, commissioners, from each of 5 regions. And so there are 10 NARUC members who are participating. They have not yet had their first meeting, so there's a limit to what I can really project for what they're all going to accomplish. But we did have Chairman Glick from FERC come and join the NARUC summer meeting in Denver and have a conversation with NARUC's current president, Paul Shalander of Idaho. And they talked about there being 3 major categories that they will anticipate addressing in some degree or another. Transmission planning, cost allocation, once the transmission lines are built, and participation in planning processes or transmission decision-making. The FERC then issued an ANOPR, Advanced Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, recently that also added generator interconnection to the list of topics that are being considered by FERC at this time and that we anticipate will be discussed in this joint task force. The first official meeting of FERC and the NARUC members is anticipated to be in November alongside NARUC's annual meeting in Louisville, Kentucky. And so at that point, we expect more clarity about exactly what they're going to cover, in what depth, what the outcomes will be, but presumably it will be anywhere from just improving and understanding across FERC commissioners and FERC staff and NARUC members across the country and the regional differences and other considerations, all the way up to actually developing maybe some sets of guidelines or principles for decision making. And we'll have to see how that actually unfolds, but we do anticipate that each of those meetings, because FERC delineated this as a official task force in one of their orders, that all of the meetings will be open meetings. They will be announced in advance. There will be opportunities for participation. All NARUC members are invited to participate, whether or not they were appointed to the task force itself. We've had our leadership make that very clear. I expect that there will be lots of stakeholders from both the FERC world and the NARUC world who will be participating and watching closely in what's happening as well. So much more to unfold there, but we are excited about it. Our members are really excited about it. There's certainly a collective recognition that this is a very important issue right now and a desire to improve many of the current strategies that are used to build transmission and all of the associated aspects that I've already mentioned.
Do you anticipate there'll be a virtual component to that meeting in November for other stakeholders or for the NARUC members who aren't able to travel for whatever reason?
I don't know yet, so I wouldn't want to speculate on that. As of right now, we are planning the annual meeting in November as an in-person only event, but I don't know if this additional task force meeting would be hybrid or what the approach will be taken.
Sure, totally understandable. Certainly living through these experiences on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. I completely understand. So we'll check back. So I want to remind our audience again that the program is almost half over and your questions are so wanted and we would love to hear from you. So please feel free, any observations, any questions for Danielle and Lynn, any of your thoughts around what's been said so far, please just hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I'd be delighted to moderate and take all questions. So thank you very much. We'll keep going here with a few that have been prepared in advance. This is for both Danielle and Lynn. So we all know that NARUC works very closely with NESIO, the state energy officials, National Governors Association, and other state-based national trade associations. Can you talk about how these relationships, these many collaborative relationships, benefit state regulators?
Lynn, do you want to go first?
Sure. These relationships are, in my view, absolutely essential. So many people external to the states look at states as this huge monolith. Information goes out, it goes in, and nobody knows where it goes. So that's one reason why it's imperative for me to work so closely with my NESIO and NGA brethren, particularly. You know, we also work very closely with the National Association of State Legislatures. We work with NEMA, the emergency management folks, because of the topics that we work on, like particularly in cybersecurity, particularly in emergency management. We have to talk to each other because we're going to be expected to execute our roles and responsibilities seamlessly in an emergency management event. So we need to know who each other are and what our equities are before going into that kind of a conversation. But it's also imperative for us to work together to represent our members really well. Some examples of things that we're working on cooperatively right now are information sharing. Again, looking at that state not as a monolith, but as, you know, different entities within a state. How are stakeholders engaging with us in sharing information, threat information on cybersecurity, physical threat information? Where's it going once it gets into a state, and what are state agencies doing with that information? So trying to shine a light there. We're also working cooperatively on supply chain. NGA, NESIO, and NARUC will be hosting a roundtable on the topic in the very near future. Again, it's just not an issue that affects public utility regulators. It's certainly an issue that will affect state energy officials, and governors' advisors need to understand what supply chain risk is and how stakeholders are approaching managing that risk. So it's imperative that we work together. The last thing that I will mention is we're also working with NESIO on a project that we call CATS. Don't ask me what it stands for, but essentially what we're doing is looking at the cybersecurity of solar. So we're taking it beyond their traditional utility infrastructure and working together to really understand the risks that are growing with the addition of that additional infrastructure.
And I want to build on what Lynn was saying. Of course, she's talking about this generally as the collaboration value, but also very specifically in the issue area space that, that she leads for us. In looking across another set of issues, it's just as important. Of course, I mentioned the NARUC NASIO Task Force on Comprehensive Electricity Planning, and the value of working across the Commission and the state energy offices there was really special because in many states, you know, every state's different, chronically unique. They each have different, the agencies in each state have different roles and responsibilities. They have different types of bandwidth. They have different charges. They report to different parts of the leadership structure within the states. It's really diverse. But in many states, the state energy office has more of a policy making role or a policy advising role. And then the commission has more of this adjudicating role. And they're intended to be a, you know, a neutral party who decides between competing interests and views of the world and their decision making. And so within the context of electricity planning, it was really valuable to have both of those perspectives because it allowed the energy offices and the commissions to better understand one another, but also to bring a broader view of what the opportunity space really looks like for something like comprehensive planning or, you know, system planning. We run 3 at least different working groups, state working groups that are jointly run by NARUC and NESIO, and we have combined members. We have one around microgrids. We have one that we call Grid Interactive Efficient Buildings, or GEB, which is essentially flexible demand or the ability to use efficiency and demand flexibility together. And then we're starting some new collaborations around electric vehicles and transportation electrification. And in all of these cases, it's a wonderful complement because in some states, there's more technical expertise at the energy office, and other states it's at the commission. In some states, it's more of the policy role is in one of these places or another. Sometimes there are unique opportunities in a commission or a state to move forward with a pilot on some of these newer technologies and issue spaces. And if we were only working with NARUC members or NESIO were only working with their NESIO members, we would miss some of those opportunities. We just, under the GEB working group, we just held a webinar, a state working group meeting and webinar last week, where we had someone from the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission and the Minnesota State Energy Office. They're both working towards bringing stakeholders together and defining pilots and ensuring that the benefits of demand flexibility are going to be realized for their states. But because their structures are different, it's a different entity who has the opportunity to really bring those folks together, do that kind of stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management to result in benefits that will accrue to the residents of the state. So beyond that, I think I know I can speak for both Lynn and I. We really enjoy working with our colleagues at these other associations. It's a wonderful kind of community. It's a unique space to be the folks who are getting to watch what's happening across the country, pull the best practices out, make sure that folks from one place are aware of other places that have similar challenges and that maybe have overcome those. It's a great chance to really help our colleagues out in the field leapfrog and learn from one another, and that's very gratifying, and it's a philosophy that our colleagues at these other associations, state associations, also hold, which makes it fun.
And I just want to add to that, Danielle, you're absolutely right. I learned something from my colleagues at NESIO and GA and all of the other N groups, as we call them, that I am able then to take into our members for their benefit. So it's really, really a valuable relationship.
Good. I have actually a follow-up to that, which is, can you talk a little bit about how the federal government fits into all of these relationships with the N groups, and particularly in light of some of the challenges that you've outlined here?
Well, I can start. I can talk about the relationships that we've built with the federal government. Of course, as Danielle pointed out at the very beginning, CPI is grant funded. And for my work in the critical infrastructure, cybersecurity, and resilience, most of the funding comes out of DOE's CSER office. We have a fabulous working relationship with the folks in CSER. They are very supportive of what we are doing. And they are also very engaged in what we're doing. So we absolutely need them in the conversation. So building that relationship was really important to me. We also have relationships with NERC, with FERC, with, so the regulators in that space. We work with the Department of Homeland Security, and we build as many relationships as we can, because ultimately they will benefit our community.
Good. Danielle, anything you'd like to add?
Sure, yeah. And beyond the partnership with CSER, much of the rest of the portfolio that CPI works on is different offices at DOE. So there's the Office of Electricity, there's the Office of Fossil Energy, and a couple of different components there. We've worked with Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office. We have a lot of partnerships for which we are quite grateful. Nuclear Energy Office, and in many cases, our as Lynn said, our N group colleagues have grants from many of those same offices and portions of DOE, and so we have the opportunity not just to partner with each other, but also to partner with each other and with these, wonderful folks at the federal government who have technical expertise, who have access to resources, who have a national breadth and depth that exceeds what our 8-person team is ever going to have, even if we keep growing. And so we get the opportunity to bring them a perspective from the states. We have this chance to collaborate with our state peers and help make those connections. And we also very frequently get to help different parts of DOE communicate with each other, because it is such a large organization. You do often need folks from outside to be able to let you know what the left hand and the right hand are both working on similar things.
Good, that's very helpful. and actually ties in beautifully to the next question, which goes to you, Danielle, which is you actually came to NARUC from DOE, so and EPA. But can you talk a little bit about the insights that you've had from working in the federal government and how that brings value to your new role and understanding in your new role?
Sure, yes. So part of the reason I can say so easily that it can be valuable to have external parties help folks at DOE understand what's going on in other parts of the agency is having experienced that myself. I've been at NARUC for 3.5 years now and was at DOE for almost 8 years before that, and 3 to 5 at EPA if you count being a consultant as well. And so really appreciated my time in the federal government. I think it prepared me extremely well for being valuable, I think, at NARUC. I really think about my career as supporting states in all of these roles and just different parts of state agencies, which is probably part of why this N-group collaboration is so meaningful. I view my career as at EPA helping state environmental agencies. At DOE, I was largely working with state energy offices, and now at NARUC, I'm working with the state public utility commissions. And in all of those cases, supporting their efforts to envision and implement clean energy strategies, policies, programs, et cetera. And so I bring these different perspectives about what state agencies can do and different strategies with me, but I also bring the common thread of supporting states with peer sharing, supporting states by providing an understanding of emerging best practices and lessons learned and the value of learning, not just what has worked really well, but also what didn't work and how to avoid making the same mistakes again, and really learn from colleagues elsewhere across the country. I also, for this particular work, we've explained that NARUC CPI is grant funded. It's been really helpful being able to see federal grants from both sides, for sure. That is not a necessary part of someone coming into my role, but it has been really helpful. When I was at DOE, one of my roles at one point was running a large grant program with state and local agencies, and now being on the other side and understanding reporting requirements from a totally different perspective and grant compliance requirements from a totally different perspective gives me a sense of, well, why do we have to do these things that I don't think would be obvious by just reading the regulations, and a perspective around which ones are, in fact, extremely important and which ones are checking boxes, because there's some of that in any kind of role like this or any work with large bureaucracies. So I also have to say that I really enjoy in moving to NARUC that I still get to work with my former DOE colleagues, because I really appreciated all of those relationships and the bright folks who were there that were my colleagues and still are.
That's good. It is a people business when all is said and done, isn't it?
I say all the time to my team, and when it comes down to it, the world is run by people. And so right within institutions, and so they are constrained by and products of those institutions. But ultimately, the world is run by people, and people make decisions.
Well said. So I'll say to the people on our call here today, this is your last reminder. If you have any questions or thoughts or observations, this would be a great time to enter them in the Q&A button right at the bottom of your screen. It's very easy. Good. Thank you for listening here. I'll continue on. We're talking about prior careers. So Lynn, you actually had a significant work experience at NERC prior to joining CPI. Can you talk a little bit about how that background has been helpful in your current role?
Yes, that's right. I've actually spent the vast majority of my career at NERC. And from NERC, I went into state government working for the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities and now at NARUC. But my experience at NERC, I still use everything I learned at NERC today. I employ all of the skills and all of the knowledge that I acquired during my career at NERC every single day. So for example, my knowledge of technology and IT specifically comes from my time at NERC. As the CIO for NERC, I was responsible for building and protecting networks. ensuring network uptime, and also introducing innovative new productivity solutions for the NARUC staff. So that role taught me the value of customer service and the power of effective listening, skills that I continue to rely on today. While at NERC, I was also part of the drafting team for the first 2 versions of the NERC SIP standards. Now, during that time, we had no idea that we were building a cottage industry, but it was a fascinating experience for me. It gave me a ton of insight into on-the-ground challenges that utilities are facing. It gave me direct engagement with controls frameworks and firsthand experience with regulatory policymaking and compliance enforcement. Again, having that background is so important for me when I look to educate public utility commissions. They need to understand what NERC SIP is, how it's developed, and how utilities are expected to comply with those standards. But most importantly, I'll reflect on this. My experience at NARUC taught me at NERC that I bring into NARUC is the value of collaboration, and we were just talking about that. None of us can solve the challenges that we face today on our own. To quote Hillary Clinton, it really does take a village. And we can't do that without collaboration, real collaboration. Now, collaboration is one of those words that borders on jargon, kind of like resilience. Depending on who you ask, it means something different. But real active collaboration and engagement, teamwork, that's how we're going to succeed. And it is that understanding of the value of collaboration that drives how I work today. That's why I enjoy so much working with Danielle, because I think she shares that vision of collaboration and teamwork. And together, I think we have built a really strong team that will bring those values to our members. So I really appreciate that question.
Good, thank you very much. And we do have a question from the audience, which is, the questioner says, I'm curious about the extent to which justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, which is prominent for the federal government right now under this administration, is getting into public utility discussions.
It's a really big priority. I mean, it's not necessarily called Justice 40 in the State Utility Commission world, but clearly we have seen the commissions embrace the same moment that the federal government has and see that there is a tremendous need, not just an opportunity, to improve past practices and move forward in new ways. We've seen multiple commissions work on pulling together new job descriptions and trying to figure out how they can hire, I'm usually hearing them say DEI, but diversity, equity, and inclusion, coordinators or roles. We are aware of multiple states that have had equity embedded into the requirements of what they have to manage towards, measure, both as organizations and in their decision-making around utility rate making. Washington State has been leading in this for a couple of years, in fact, prior to the current administration, in putting together how can they establish metrics around equity and how can they compare the ability of the utilities investments to facilitate safe, affordable, and reliable service and equitable. And so they were the first state we were aware of, but they're not the only state at all at this point. And in fact, we're really excited because starting in the new federal fiscal year, we have a new project we are calling an Energy Justice Roundtable that's going to encompass more than just a roundtable, but we're going to be working on a background or a white paper establishing some foundational knowledge and information around 3 key areas that we're thinking about in the energy justice space. One is around inclusion in decision-making, utility commission decision-making, and ensuring that we have representation from historically excluded communities in commission decision-making because it affects everybody. A second pillar of this is around customer impact of arrearages and different kinds of rate-making policies. And so the COVID pandemic has really brought to light how we had not collectively thought about what happens if you have large numbers of people who are suddenly economically distressed. And what does that mean for them? We are talking about what does it mean for the financial backbone of the system and other dialogues like the COVID lessons learned, but what does it mean for them? How can we restructure our expectations and come up with new ways of ensuring that utility services provided as a fundamental service for life and health and safety reasons? And then a third area is around access to low and moderate income access to clean energy programs, energy efficiency programs, transportation electrification programs, other distributed energy resource type programs. So we're really looking forward to getting started once the new federal fiscal year begins on some of that background research, and then we'll be convening a group of folks, including our N-Group colleagues. We're going to be working with NASIO and National Governors Association on this, and bringing folks together to offer case studies and examples, and we'll be writing all of this up into a broader paper that provides examples and resources for how other commissions, state energy offices, governors can leverage what's being done elsewhere and bring the ball forward even farther.
Great. I'm so glad our questioner framed that question so we could hear more about those big plans. You've got a lot contemplated there. We all wish you luck with all of that. So my next question is for both of you, which is you've both had extraordinarily successful careers. And so obviously, I think our early career women who may be listening in would be interested in knowing more about how you traversed all of those courses, any advice you'd like to dispel at this time, and if they are interested in state policy and regulatory matters, are there any particular tips you'd like to offer, including Danielle, as you said at the outset, CPI is growing. Are there possible ways in which it's growing that might intersect with other people's interests who are in other venues now?
Lynn, why don't you start?
Oh my gosh, I'm an old dog, so I do have some tips, and one is perseverance. You know, we were just talking about diversity. Particularly in the field in which I work, diversity is not something that we typically see. Just persevere, be yourself. You know, I overcame a lot of challenges by making sure that I was an expert. I got myself back to school. Certainly my education has, you know, compensated for a lot of those diversity issues. And also have fun. When I was working with NERC, you know, I did not have any relationships with state regulators. It was only when I went into the Board of Public Utilities that I really saw the value that that commission was providing to the citizens of the state of New Jersey. And that just lit a fire under my desire to be a better public servant. So again, be persistent and have fun.
Great words of advice. How about you, Danielle?
Yeah, I think this is such important work, and we're not in the commissions right now. Lynn was, and thank goodness, because that's how we found each other. But I even though I'm at a nonprofit now, I consider myself still in public service. I was a federal employee for 10 years or more. I think that the opportunity to serve and to provide value in a way that is larger than just what one person can do and has that ripple impact of being able to help folks connect and learn what's happening elsewhere and be better at what they do is just so exciting. I think that we have a huge need for more people at the state level I will certainly try to recruit people to NARUC too, but there's a huge need among our members. I mean, one of the biggest barriers to progress is just a lack of bandwidth. And there's a real need for more employees, especially those who are motivated and coming to events like WCEE events, clearly interested and engaged and probably quite passionate about energy and environmental issues. My biggest advice is don't be intimidated by obscure titles in state government when applying for jobs or looking for jobs. It's crazy what some people's titles are. They don't make any sense relative to what they actually do day to day. I was just talking yesterday with someone from the California Public Utilities Commission who's working to lead their energy efficiency efforts around planning for 4-year, 8-year plans across the utilities, and his title is regulatory analyst. I mean, it just, you have to unfortunately get over what these titles are and read more about what the descriptions are. State government, federal government is the same way, has an arcane set of structures that don't necessarily impact you once you're working there, but do have an impact on their ability to advertise in logical ways for new employees. I did also want to mention that NARUC itself has created a new career center very recently. We just launched it about a month ago. There are some jobs posted right now with our international department. NARUC runs an international department with incredible activities across the globe. Of course, they're doing them virtually at the moment, but travel will resume at some point, and that can be very exciting, and bringing volunteers from the state commissions to other countries to help them learn about utility regulation and the foundational cost principles and economic principles and how to apply those in their own context. There's also a position posted right now for someone that would work closely with Lynn and with me, a senior fellow to help us around electricity policy and working across these end groups and helping our members figure out a path forward on transmission and distribution system issues. We expect more growth in the future as well, but the NARUC Career Center also has lots of positions that are posted at our member agencies. And so there are opportunities literally everywhere in the country right now to get involved in this work if someone is interested in that.
Well, I'm sure our audience would love to work with both of you, so don't be surprised if you get some inquiries coming out of today's webinar. I'm going to wrap this up. We're really approaching the end of our hour together. Thank you all in the audience for being with us. And I can see from the participation list, you've stayed with us right here to the end. So we appreciate your thoughtful listening. Thank you, Danielle and Lynn, for joining us and providing such instructive information about the many issues facing state public utility commissions today and all the good work that you're doing within the Center for Partnerships and Innovation to help them meet these challenges. We will be having another executive exchange on September 14th with the Alliance to Save Energy President and CEO, Paula Glover. So I hope everyone will stay tuned for that. And again, thank you so very much for joining today. The recording of today's event will be posted on the WCEE website for anyone who would like to rehear it or perhaps didn't hear it today. Thank you, Danielle and Lynn, again. It was a pleasure having you join the WCEE Virtual Executive Exchange. Have a great day.
Thank you.